From Anshe Sfar Beth El Emeth Congregation, it's time to take 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of the 5 biblical roots of Chanukah. We know that Chanukah is a rabbinic holiday. There's no book of Maccabees that's part of our canon. As far as we're concerned, there's no book of Maccabees. There's no story of Chanukah. The only story of Chanukah that we view as authoritative is the one told in the Talmud from the Megillas Tainis, an early rabbinic document that tells us the story of Chanukah the way we want to remember it. But, Kol Tikkun Rabbanan Kein D'Oraisa Tikkun, whatever the rabbis institute, they always institute it parallel to something in the Torah. So the question is, where do we get the roots of this sort of mitzvah of lighting candles in your house? And where do you get something like that? And what is it based on? So I want to show that there are actually 5 biblical roots of the Chanukah candles. Number one, it's a Zecher L'Mikdash. We have a concept elsewhere in the Talmud that we try to remember and commemorate things that happen in the temple. And in many ways, the Chanukah, although it's different, it's not 7 candles, it's 8, because we don't want to have an official menorah being lit. That's only in the temple in Jerusalem. But in many ways, it is a commemoration of the candles in the Beis HaMikdash. In fact, Zolti and others have suggested that when they first instituted Chanukah before the temple was destroyed, maybe they didn't light candles. Only after the temple was destroyed, then they said, hey, let's commemorate the temple by lighting candles in our homes. Our homes being the best we got of the temple left in our society. Also, this would explain certain halachos. These 5 biblical roots will explain various halachos, laws that we have regarding Chanukah. So for instance, you're not allowed to use the light. We have an extra light here, the shamash, because we don't want to claim that we're reading or doing this video to the light of the 3 candles. Rather, we have other lights here, and we have the shamash, so we're not using the lights. Why can't we use the lights? Because they're holy. Why is it holy? Because it's Zecher L'Mikdash, because in some ways these candles are like the Beis HaMikdash candles, Hanerus Halalu Kodeshim. These candles, they're holy. Also, we say Hadlaka Osa Mitzvah. It's the lighting that makes the mitzvah, similar to the Beis HaMikdash. The lighting did the trick. Similarly, Rav Schachter says that the whole idea of lighting candles, of Chanukah itself, is to realize that there was a moment where we had a glimpse of greater divine presence during the Second Temple, although it was generally a pretty pathetic temple, but there was a moment of a glimpse of divine presence, of Shekhinah, and that moment is a hint to the future, that again in the future, God will rest with Israel. What's the symbol of God resting with Israel? The most western candle. That's the symbol that God rests with Israel, because that candle used to last all day and all night. Second biblical root of the Chanukah candles is mezuzah. We know that although we don't do it today, originally the idea was to put the candles either on the side of the mezuzah, one opinion in the Talmud, or the other opinion which we follow, we put the mezuzah on the other side, mezuzah on the right side as you come in, and the Chanukah candles on the left. Why? To be surrounded by the mitzvos. As if to say, just like when I walk in the door, I'm surrounded by the mitzvah of mezuzah. So to the Chanukah candles surround me as I walk into the house. Also, it's the only mitzvah, and here this biblical root expresses itself in the halacha, it's the only mitzvah which is house-centric. Mezuzah and the lighting of the candles. If you don't have a house, you don't have a mezuzah. You don't have to put a mezuzah on your necklace if you don't have a house. You don't have to put it in your car dangling from your rear view mirror. If you don't have a house, you don't need a mezuzah. If you don't have a Chanukah, if God forbid someone was homeless, they don't have to light. This mitzvah was designed for your house. So much so that some say that if you're away from your house, you have to chip in with the person whose house it is to light the candles there. You can't just light in someone else's house. Other people disagree. The idea that it is at the door, the idea that it's there to share the good news about God with others, is common. The idea of mezuzah. Third root, biblical root of Chanukah is Sukkot. Where else do you have 8 days where you say Hallel all 8 days? Only Sukkot and Chanukah. Now, the book of Maccabees, which as I said, it's not part of our canon, but there could be some vestiges from this original book in our halacha. So they say there that year when they were fighting the Greeks, they couldn't celebrate Sukkot properly. So what did they do? They said when Sukkot was over, and they had a military victory, they said, you know what? Let's keep 8 days of Sukkot now. Now that sounds a little bit ridiculous. You can't do Sukkot in the winter. But this idea was preserved in the Talmud, where Beit Shammai, the one school of thought, said that you should have 8 candles on the first day and go down to 1. Why? Because the cows, the offerings, the sacrifices of Sukkot also go down from 13 down to 7. So we see that on an 8-day holiday, you go down in sacrifice, so we should go down with the candles. We don't do that, we go up. But there was a suggestion that Chanukah and Purim should be on the same plateau, and indeed, in terms of 8 days of full Hallel, that's absolutely true. It's only 2 times we have such a long stretch of the full Hallel. Another idea that Rabbi Soloveitchik suggests, biblical root of Chanukah, is Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name. Where do we find that we should take candles, put them on the outside, in the open window, and let everybody find out that God did a miracle for the Jews. God rests with the Jews. God cares about the Jews. Where's the mitzvah to do that? The answer is Kiddush Hashem. That somebody says, Finkelstein, eat this ham sandwich in front of this big crowd here, or I'm going to shoot you. So I say, shoot away. I'm not eating the ham sandwich. Why? I want to sanctify God's name. I want to tell everybody, I follow the Torah. God gave us the Torah and I'm following it. Or if someone asks me even privately to murder someone else, I say, I'm not doing it. I want to sanctify God's name. What halacha does this explain? It explains the halacha at the end of the Rambam that mocher ksuso, chozer apsachim. We say that when it comes to most mitzvot, you spend no more than 1/5 of your wealth. If I couldn't get a lulav, I could spend up to 1/5 of my salary, my savings, to buy a lulav. But 1/3. But when it comes to Chanukah, you sell the shirt on your back. I mean, that's all I got left. Sell it. You've got to have that Chanukah candle. Go chozer apsachim. Go begging. Begging, it's not nice to beg. You're right. Jews, we try not to beg if you don't have to. But if you have to buy Chanukah candles, go beg for it. Go get the money. You've got to be able to light Chanukah candles. Why do we go so far? Why is it such an extreme mitzvah? For mezuzah, I wouldn't have to go that far. The answer is that this mitzvah is rooted in Kiddush Hashem, on the sanctification of God's name. What happens when the sanctification of God's name? You give up your life. There's no limit to it. So too in Chanukah candles. In some ways, it's mitzvah chaviva hi admod. It's a very beloved mitzvah. The 5th final root is Purim. We see from Purim that you can make up a holiday that comes after the biblical canon, after the Pentateuch is sealed, and no more laws that come out. Nothing that we do in Jewish life pretty much is, as a mitzvah for sure, comes from anywhere after Deuteronomy. That's it. Deuteronomy is the mitzvah that tells us how to live our lives. Purim, it's true that it's in the canon, it's in the Megillah Esther, but that's not considered a biblical law. And yet, we do it. We say, we thank God for giving us a commandment of Megillah, even though it's not a commandment, it's a rabbinic commandment. We see that you could make it a holiday in addition to the regular holiday. And Rabbi Schechter explains that really Chanukah and Purim are similar, because it was through Purim that we said, oh, if Mordechai and Esther save the Jews, then they'll be Jews, so there'll be a redemption. And also, their son is going to help rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. Somehow through them, the Daryavish came and he reinstituted the building of the Beis HaMikdash, which Koresh had started. So through the Purim story, the temple is rebuilt. And through the Chanukah story, the temple is refurbished. And we have hope for a future temple, because Chanukah gave us hope that one day there would be something as beautiful as this temple in which the divine presence rested. Gives us hope for the future. So these holidays are modeled after each other, holidays that bespeak something going into the future. There are other biblical hints to Chanukah, and not so much in the halachic realm, but in the interpretation of the text. If you look at the list of holidays in Parshat Emor, chapter 23, in Leviticus, The next thing after Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkos, after Sukkos, what does it have? Light the menorah. And what's that doing there? It doesn't belong there, because Chanukah comes after Sukkot. It's the holiday after Sukkot. And finally, there's a story akin to the Chanukah story in Book of Kings, where this woman, she pours the jug of oil. As long as she has enough, as she has vessels to pour it into, there's always more oil to be found. When she ran out of jugs, then there was no more oil. It's a similar miracle of the oil in the Book of Kings. So there are many biblical roots to Chanukah. And what does this tell us about Chanukah? Well, the connection to the Mikdash tells us that when we look at these candles, we should remember that one day there'll be a temple like this. We're continuing the tradition of the temple. The mezuzah tells us that these candles are a way of showing everyone that we're committed to God, just like our mezuzah. And the connection to Sukkot is the idea that we should remember that these are days of thanksgiving, to give thanks to God for all the bounty that He's given us, days of thanksgiving and Hallel. And it's Kiddush Hashem. We should remember that it's our job to spread the word about how God is so good to us in our personal lives, in our national lives, and we always have to let everyone know about that. And finally, like Purim, it reminds us that God can do miracles for us in those days and in our days as well. And whenever He does, it behooves us to give thanks. Thank you for joining us here at the Anshe Sefard Beth Emes congregation for a discussion of the biblical roots of Chanukah. Join us each week for a discussion of the Parsha and the holidays. And thanks to Jason Lefkowitz, our producer. Thank you. A good Chanukah.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein. To learn more, visit asb.org.